Here we are again, and I'm ready to talk about the third book that we read for book club. I'm in my bedroom because my husband is having a horrible flare-up of his autoimmune condition, and he's just on the couch in the living room, and I don't want to bug him, so I'm in my bedroom. You might see some babies. There's one. Wondering, what's mommy doing? But yes, let's talk about the book. The book is American Dirt by Jeanine Cummins, I believe. The book American Dirt, I'm going to talk about the book first. So, the book is about Lydia and her son Luca. Lydia and Luca are the sole survivors of a massacre. Lydia's husband was a journalist, and he wrote a lot about cartels, criticizing them, exposing them, and basically in an act of retaliation, the cartel killed him, killed their whole family, and Lydia and Luca are the sole survivors of that, and are very aware that people will know that they survived and will try and kill them as well. So decide to flee to the US. So the whole book is essentially portraying the journey of Mexicans trying to go to the US and everything that involves, like the trains they have to go past, and the journey they have to go on. So the whole book is about the journey between Lydia and her very small son Luca. Now, I quite liked the book. I just recently actually recommended it to a colleague who wanted a quite easy but very emotional read. So I was like, I think you'll like this book. I think it's a very good book. It's very well written. Certainly. It certainly starts with like the Big Bang, with like the massacre. And then it does a good job of portraying this sort of feeling of like constantly looking over your shoulder. It felt relatively well researched at times, like talking about like people strapping themselves to trains and things like that. I wasn't, being from the UK, like obviously I'm very aware of the issues around immigration from Mexico to the US, but I wasn't necessarily aware of the mechanics of it as much. So that was quite interesting to me, like the different like journeys you can take and different options. So that I found that very interesting. Sometimes it did feel maybe a little bit melodramatic to me, although sometimes I don't know if that was maybe the reviews changing me. Some of the members of my book club certainly found it quite traumatic at times. But generally, I quite liked it. I think I rated it 4 stars. It was well written. It had a good pace. I think it was one member of my book club who was like, I just couldn't get into it at all. But generally, like, I found it quite easy to read. And I wasn't, I think I'm quite resilient. I'm not one of those people who will start reading and be like, oh my god, this is traumatic, I can't go on. Like, I can read through pretty traumatic stuff quite easily. So, I had no problems to continue reading it, and it was it was a read that made me want to keep reading it, if that makes sense. So I quite enjoyed it in that way, and like I said, it like taught me more about some of the mechanics and things, and I found that very interesting. And oh, hello, look, there's the other. She's like, what are you doing, mommy? Do you wanna come over here? No? Okay, she's running away. Where was I? That's what they do. Oh, kissing. Look. They're giving cuddles. Hello. Anyways, total distraction. Should not have filmed in his room. yes, so overall, I quite liked the book. So I gave it a 4. However, and this is where we talk about bigger than the book, right? There's a lot of controversy surrounding this book. You can read about it online. Just type it in. Like, just type in American Dirt. You'll find controversy quite easily. And a lot of the controversy surrounds, should a woman who's a white woman, so Jeanine Cummins has Irish Puerto Rican ancestry, although until a few years ago she didn't really embrace her Puerto Rican ancestry much, but she's definitely not Mexican. And I think there was a lot of questions around, should she have written this book? Now, I'm not one for being like, well, if you're not gay, you can't write a book about the gay experience or whatever. I think authors can write the books they want to write, as long as they do their job, they do their research. And from what Jeanine Cummins talks about in the author's note at the end, she certainly did some research, she spoke to experts, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of, especially Mexican authors, who might criticize her research and who might say she paints very stereotypical pictures at times of Mexicans and of escaping Mexico and gets the Spanish wrong and things like that, which is fair enough. I genuinely just don't know enough about this issue yet to really know and criticize it, so I will leave that to people who know this much better than I do. If they criticize it, I'm sure they have their reasons for it. For me, personally, the things that I certainly connect with in this debate is not, should Jeanine Cummins, the person, have written this book. It is more around, why are publishers so keen to pick the book that is written by the white woman with no connection to the Mexican experience, giving her a 7-figure advance for writing the book, rather than pick one of the many, many books that is written by Mexican authors. Why does the publishing industry focus on viewing the Mexican immigration experience through this white lens? And some of the things that Jeanine Cummins has also said about, like, the more she learned, the more she wanted to write the book. And the more she questioned whether she should write the book, but then wanted to write the book. Sometimes it feels a little white savory, I suppose. And perhaps Jeanine Cummins was like, well, they're not going to pick a Mexican author. I'm going to try and do my best. Maybe I'll get some of this across. And I think it was very typical my book club experience of this. In my book club, there were people who sat there and said, I empathize more now with people who undertake this journey. And I was like, do you know? Did you not before? And I think that is very symptomatic of the issue people have with Jeanine Cummins' novel. The fact that it very much feels like it had to be plated up by a white person, supported by majorly probably white publishers, and be like, well, this is what the Mexican experience of immigration is like, for people to be like, oh, I see, that is really bad, rather than listening to the people who have been talking about it for years, writing books about it for years. So I have a massive issue with this. There's also an issue I read about when I was reading the book, which is like over a year, almost 2 years ago now, that when they had a event celebrating the book, they put on the middle of the table centerpieces, which were a piece of cement and a bit of razor wire on top, like the wall between Mexico and the US. And I was just like, did you know? Did you? So there's just a lot of tone deafness, I think, in the publication around this novel, and in the pushing this novel and portraying it as the great novel about Mexican immigration, and this will like further your understanding, and you will be so like, oh, wow, after you've read this book. And I think a lot of white people do feel like it. I feel like it's a very white book club. I read this great quote. I can't read it because my phone is recording. But it was saying how American Dirt is trauma porn designed for a white audience and white book clubs, so people can sit in their armchairs and feel like they're doing something without doing anything, by like trying to understand the Mexican experience more. And I felt that that was probably a very true representation maybe of how this book has been received. I personally, like I said, I don't have an issue necessarily with Jeanine Cummins writing this book. I do have an issue, however, Jeanine Cummins, with the fact that at the end of the book, in my book, there was an author's note from her. And in the author's note, she talks a lot about, oh, should I have written this book? Should I not have written this book? And she then talks about the fact that her husband has immigration experience, which made her feel like she can write more authentically about immigration. And I was like, oh, I see. And I was like, oh, your husband has, the experience of immigrating into the US. Okay, I got it. Her husband is Irish. Obviously, she doesn't say that. She very much leaves you to deduct, as I did, and I'm not stupid, that her husband might be Mexican or South American, emigrating into the US through the ways that she describes in the books. Which is not true. So I do have an issue with that. And I think that was a very calculated author's note, the way it was written and with what was omitted and what was discussed. So that did piss me off a bit when I found that out. So yes, that's my review of American Dirt, which is probably half about how I think about the book and then half about, should this book exist at all? She might go, why are we talking about this? But I think these kind of discussions are really important to have. Like, who gets to write books? Who gets to decide what books get to be published? Like I say, I don't believe that, you don't get to write books about certain experiences just because you haven't firsthand experienced them. But we do need to ask important questions about why are publishers picking up stories made by white people about minority ethnic experiences, by straight people about gay and trans experiences, by men about women. Like, why does this happen again and again? And why can't we just listen to the authentic voices that have had those experiences and have written about them in probably similarly beautiful ways and maybe better ways? So I do think that the publishing industry really needs to reckon a little bit with itself. Like, why am I giving a 7-figure advance to this white author writing a book about the Mexican immigration experience, even though she doesn't really have any relation to that experience at all? So those are my thoughts on the book. It was not a bad book. Like, I wouldn't say don't read it. It was well written, well paced, in my opinion, maybe at times a little bit melodramatic, and maybe a little bit safe as well at times. Go forth and read reviews about the book, and there's lots of good reads about it. Make your own opinion. Find other books by Mexican authors. Read both of them. Make your own mind up. I would never tell you not to read a book, even if it is a shit book, like Verity. But, read many books, and come to your own conclusion. And this was American Dirt. And there's no babies. Well, there's a baby, but she's just having a poo-poo in her little box. Eating. Oh wait, he's just sitting there, look. He's just like, What are you doing? Why are you in my room? Go away. He's not